Welcome back! You're watching part 4 of the Black Road Sky version 0.3 tutorial series, and in this one we'll be picking up our first trucking contract and heading out to visit a new space station, finally. We'll be visiting Laika Orbital. Yeah, we wasted enough time learning to fly this thing. Gotta start making them space bucks. So I'll be running through things probably a little bit quicker this time. We're not going to be learning anything new in terms of actually piloting the ship. These are all skills that we've covered in parts 2 and 3. So I'll be explaining what I'm doing as I go, but if you've been following along up until this point, it should all be fairly familiar. Go ahead and load up game here, and head into the station. Head over to the contracts terminal. Like I said, for our first job, we'll want to choose something that's heading out to Laika Orbital. We'll do that by saying browse available jobs, and we'll want jobs originating from this station, so like 1, and we've got a bunch of options there. If you want to choose something other than Laika Orbital, Godspeed, man. But this tutorial is going to assume that you're flying from Gagarin to Laika, and this is the shortest and simplest run in the game, and the only one that really doesn't require you to think about orbital mechanics, which is what we'll be getting to in the next video. Now these contracts are randomly generated and wildly imbalanced. I didn't put a ton of work into making sure they were well balanced. This, like so much in the game, is sort of a placeholder system. So basically, let's see what we've got here. Although they're randomly generated, I do make sure that you start the game with contracts out to Laika, so you always have these. At least something heading out that way. These are both for 1,200 credits, so let's just pick one. I'll hit number 2 here, and we've got 8 hours to haul some fruit out to Laika Orbital. The time limit is worth considering. In this case, 8 hours is way more than enough, and I think in most cases you have more than enough time. If you're overdue, you still get half the pay, so it's not, which should be enough at least to cover fuel costs and stuff. So don't worry too much about it. Some contracts like this one have advance pay, and you get docked a certain number of credits if you decide to cancel the job. And that's about all there is to the trucking contracts. They periodically expire, and then new ones are regenerated. Each station will have unique contracts to other stations. Anyway, that's unnecessary information at this point, I guess. We're taking a Laika contract, and hit 2, accept contract. Fruit is now being loaded. They give us 50 credits off the bat, and we can head out. So yeah, don't worry, or think too hard about where on this ship that fruit just magically appeared. It makes sense, believe me. The cargo system, I need to stop saying this. I'm working on it. It's everything's placeholder. So I have plans. I'll say that. All right. This terminal, I think I mentioned it at some point, but you can always click the cargo option there if you forget where you're going. In this case, I keep saying Laika Orbital, but it also tells you how much time you have left. Once you get into it, and it's easy to forget which station you're heading towards. So this tells you the name of the station as well as the planet or moon that it's orbiting. Just so you can keep your head on straight. We will depart from the station as normal. We hit the hail button to request departure clearance from Space Traffic Control. They approve. And as always, while we're waiting here, space trucking beverage. What else are you going to do while the platform's raising? Disengage our docking magnets, raise landing gear, and once our landing gear is safely stowed, flip into maneuver mode, translate a little bit upwards, a little bit forwards, start pulling away from the station. As we pull away, we'll pull up the sensor screen and zoom out until I can see Laika Orbital. So this is something we haven't gone over yet, but it's quite straightforward. I can click on Laika Orbital to get some basic orbital information, and then I can hit the lock button here to make Laika Orbital my current target. So now I'm seeing my velocity and distance relative to that station instead of Gagarin. Lots of different ways I could make my approach here, but I'm going to keep it simple and use the same technique that we've already used, which is going to be to zero out my velocity. I'm nearly 500 kilometers out from the station, so I'm not going to be able to completely perfectly zero out my velocity. I'm not going to try to. I'm just going to get myself sort of kind of parked relative to Laika. I'm in some danger here of running into Gagarin, so I will translate upwards enough to ensure that I'm clear of the station. Also in some danger here of deorbiting, but like I said, Gagarin and Laika are close enough that you don't really have to worry about that, but it is worth sort of keeping in mind. So I'm well clear of Gagarin now. I'll go ahead and throttle up, and get my relative velocity around zero, closer to zero than it was. 12 meters per second, that's fine. And you'll see it did put us on an impact trajectory with Tyra. Our altitude is slowly decreasing. We will remedy that pretty much immediately here, but I will point out that even though I did say we don't have to worry about orbital mechanics, if we sat here for another about 380 seconds, we would crash. So let's not do that. What we will do instead is point ourselves toward Laika Orbital. I like to do so first here from the sensor screen. Gets you fairly close. Start to dial it in from the nav ball here. Remember, it's the pink circle. And then dial it in further from the numerical readout, which is a little bit twitchy. Don't, especially as you get close to zero, but feel good about that. We're going to want to throttle up now to head towards Laika, and I'm going to do so using boost mode, which I don't think we've talked about. In boost mode, you lose access to attitude and translation thrusters, as well as thrust deflectors, but you in return get a much more powerful and actually more efficient boost power. So it's a good mode to use in a situation like this. We're 400 some kilometers away. I'm just throttling up a little bit, and we're really already really flying here. Let's do. You could go a lot faster than that, but I want to give myself time to explain what we're doing here. So we can see now, Laika orbitals kind of slowly creeping towards us. But like I said, in boost mode, we don't have our boost deflector, so we need to get ready to put on the brakes. A couple ways we can do that. I can flip back into maneuver mode and just use my thrust deflectors as I get close to Laika. I can also yaw around, and once I get turned around, I'll flip back into boost mode, and it'll be a slightly more efficient, also be a quicker way. It'll use less fuel anyway. And like, what else we got to do right now? That burn that I made towards Laika, for what it's worth, you'll see was more than sufficient to get me out of an impact trajectory. We'll talk more about all these orbital data stats in the next video, but for those of you who are already familiar with such things, just want to point that out. Like I said, I normally would have made that approach a little bit faster. There's no reason to really make the approach any faster. These sort of periods of waiting are part of the game. It's a chill game. Once I'm ready to put on the brakes, I'll want to be pointing at my relative retrograde velocity vector there. Dial it in with the numerical readout. And these values are going to drift, especially if we were making that approach from quite a distance away. So those x and y velocity values are going to drift. That's fine. We're going to be making another approach. Look at that interesting cloud formation. We're going to be making another approach burn. So not worried about being perfect here. Nice and easy. Nice and easy.
1 hour later.
Alright. Finally. Let's see. Bring that relative x velocity a little closer to 0. That looks good to me. Put back into boost mode. And feels like a fine time to throttle up, bleed off that relative velocity. And overshot just a tad. No worries. I'm going to use my translation thrusters, translate first backwards to even out that z velocity. I can't translate backwards because I'm in boost mode. As I mentioned, in boost mode you lose attitude and translation thrusters as all power is diverted to the main boosters. So let's flip back into maneuver mode, translate backwards, even out that z velocity that I overshot. X and Y still looking pretty good. And that puts us in a pretty comfortable parking orbit, which is about 19 kilometers away from the station, and in good position to make a nice approach. Let's see. There we go. You can just barely see the station there in front of us. I'm going to want to point more or less towards the station, maybe a little bit above. So that looks fine. We're 19 kilometers away. I'm not going to think too hard about it. I'm just going to throttle up here, and what I often do is I just kind of watch this distance to target, and once it's decreasing at a comfortable rate, like this is fine, but I'll be sitting here for quite a while waiting. I'm just throttled up to 10% right now, being nice and careful. Throttle up a little more. Okay. I'll throttle down. Activate my reflectors. Adjust my attitude to get my relative velocity as much as possible onto the z-axis, and now I'm going to throttle up to start burning away that velocity. Okay, we don't want to overshoot it. And here we're drifting in quite nicely. And let's see if we can. We'll get it within inside of 2 kilometers. And that's comfortable. I'll go ahead and burn off the rest of that velocity. Now this puts us in a real nice parking orbit. We're parked just about 1.5 kilometers away from the station now. This is a good point to make the final approach, just like we did with Gagarin. I'm not worried about actually seeing the station. What I want to do is even myself out here on the nav ball, because evening yourself out on the nav ball is the same as evening yourself out with the station. Just because in fiction this is a standard protocol that stations are built this way, with their platforms facing in what everyone can call home. As always, there's lots of different ways to approach. I'm going to yaw just slowly here, and I'm going to yaw until my x distance is at 0.00, and then I'm going to translate forwards. To bleed off this z velocity. I'm going to bring it down, not for any reason except that my plan is that eventually there will be a 25 meter per second speed limit within 1 kilometer of the station. That's not actually a thing yet, but it is in my mind. So we'll approach nice and carefully. And slow down as we're getting closer. Z is looking pretty good. Let's fix that X, and while we're doing it, I'll give myself some. I'm going to translate downwards. We've got about 0.5 kilometer to go still. in that direction. That looks good for X. Don't need this anymore. Okay, and we're going to slow that Y velocity down as we approach. And once it gets to about 0.05, 0.0, I think of I like to kind of at 0.06. I think, well, if I continue descending at 1 meter per second, that gives me 1 minute to get things right. Every once in a while, adjusting my X and Z to try and keep these at 0. And I'm doing a lot of talking here, so I'm gonna slow down my descent, switch into docking mode, lower the landing gear. Let's get that X velocity right to 0.0. Same with the Z. And then, okay. Still got plenty of time. That should get us down in something like 20 seconds. Remember, we want to be within 10 meters of the center of the landing platform. I obviously am. And we're making a nice soft landing at just under 1 meter per second. Very nice. Engage docking magnets. Request clearance for entrance. Granted. And here we go. So not a lot of new stuff to go over there, or not a lot that we did go over there. You know, if you spent some time getting comfortable flying around Gagarin, hopefully that felt relatively straightforward. So these orbital stations are tiny. It's basically just this hangar, unlike the station class stations, which have the little promenade area. This is basically just a place to drop off and pick up cargo. So getting paid for the job is as simple as heading over to the contracts terminal, and we'll press 2 to turn in job for 1,200 credits. And 120 of those credits, or 10% if you're doing the math at home, 10% of every trucking contract will go towards paying off that loan. So we're going to earn 1,200 credits. 120 of that will automatically be sucked out to pay back that loan. Hit confirm, and then there's the math. We get 1080 in our pocket, and head back to the main menu. And from here, I can pick up another job. And what I would suggest and what I intend for new players to do is to pick a new job originating from this station. And you'll see you've got 2 available heading back to Gagarin. And so plenty of contracts to practice flying back and forth between Laika and Gagarin. Make that money, and get comfortable with the basics of flying, of undocking, and of, more importantly, of docking, without having to stress out about the orbital mechanics stuff. One other thing we can do while we're here, we don't really need to, but I'll show you how in case you get to a point where you do need to, is to refuel. It's easy. We hit refuel. I'm just going to hit 1 here for max. Worth noting, there's a 150 credit hookup fee. So it's somewhat more efficient to only fuel up when you need to, rather than refueling every single time you land. So we don't really need to refuel right now, but I will do it. Hit 5 to begin refuel. It just happens instantaneously because it's a placeholder system. And we'll exit. So we're all refueled here and ready to pick up another contract in Gagarin if we want to. And I suggest that you do if you're actually if you're actually watching these videos and playing along with the game. Which, by the way, thank you. That's cool. And when you're ready for something else, we're going to be learning the basics of orbital mechanics in the next video. And we'll be learning what all those other symbols on the nav ball mean. And it's going to be how am I supposed to end this?